Oh, okay, let's go for it. So, once again, it was a follow up on last year about the international dateline. So, let's just, before we get into the nitty gritty of halacha, let's just make sure everybody's clear why it is that we need a dateline. Why do the goyim need a dateline? What is their general need? So, let's picture for a second we have the, the earth, it's a globe, it's a round globe. And let's take a spaceship, let's freeze time, maybe a really fast airplane, and let's circle the earth and see what time it is in every place. So right now, let's say we're in California at 12 p.m. in the afternoon. We go to the east, 3 hours, 3 time zones. Every 15 degrees is an hour. And you get to New York, and now it's 3 p.m. Once again, no time passed, same freeze time, 12 p.m. in California, 3 p.m. in New York. You keep on going around to Europe, let's say England, it's 9 p.m. Keep on going further east to Eretz Yisrael, it's 10 p.m. Once again, still 12 in California, 3 in New York, so it's 10 p.m. Monday evening. Now, we go from Eretz Yisrael to Tokyo, 7 hours further to the east. It switches from 10 p.m. Monday night to 5 a.m. on Tuesday morning. And then we keep on going to New Zealand, 8 a.m. Tuesday morning. We go to Honolulu, Hawaii, 10 a.m. Tuesday morning. Now, to get from Honolulu to California, it's another 2 hours. So we're going to go from 10 a.m. Tuesday morning to 12 p.m. Tuesday afternoon. Now, once again, time did not, in this example, time did not move. We're just showing at each point in the globe where it's up to. But this is a problem. There's no way that in California it could be 12 in the afternoon on Monday afternoon and 12 in the afternoon on Tuesday afternoon at the same exact time. That obviously cannot be, and therefore we need some explanation as to figuring out how could that be possible. It's obviously not possible. It's obviously a problem. When we're going eastward, we're going to have to say at some point it switches to a day earlier. So at some point it's going to switch, let's say from 7 p.m. Monday night to 7 p.m. Sunday night. In 1 minute, in one instance, in one flash, it's going to switch a full day backwards. Or in the opposite direction, when you're going westward, you'll have to switch a day, we'll have to jump forward. If not, you're going to end up being at 2 different dates in the same place, which is obviously impossible. So everybody needs a dateline. The question is, from a halachic standpoint, where is the dateline? And the nafkaminas are tremendous, as we will discuss today. So last time we discussed, there was when the mirror was in Shin, it was in Kobe, Japan, actually, in 1941. That's when the shiur erupted. On one hand, you had the Chazon Ish, the international heavyweight champion of Psak, Paskin, that the point was where the dateline was 270 degrees to the west of Yerushalayim, or maybe easier to say 90 degrees to the east of Yerushalayim, and that is the point of the dateline. According to, then there was another opinion that came out, which was the international heavyweight champion of Zmanim and geography and astrology and all these types of motions of the sun and the moon, and that was Reb Mel Lieber, and he posted that the dateline, the time which the day switches, is 180 degrees to the west of Yerushalayim, which is also 180 degrees to the east of Yerushalayim, just 360 degrees in a circle. And he said that is the dateline, and that's quite a difference. That's a quarter of the globe of a difference. However, there's only a certain amount of lands there, not so many. It's mostly water, but there are a nice couple of things that we have to discuss: Japan and New Zealand and Hawaii and maybe Alaska. There's a lot to discuss in between, but that was a big war, so to speak, and the Mir Yeshiva in Kobe, Japan, ended up following the the international heavyweight champion of Psak, the Chazon Ish, over the champion of geography, Zman, and maps, etc. Okay. Fast forward. Now we get to look at this a little bit later. In Halacha, we have a concept of Halacha Kabasra, which is a little counterintuitive, because you would think that the earlier, as you read the Siddharis, the earlier generation is greater. Why would it be Halacha Kabasra? And the reason why it's Halacha Kabasra is sometimes, as time develops, we end up with more information and a greater angle to see what's going on. So as things developed, what actually happened was, there's a couple more shittas out there. That's number one. And number two, what happened is we get to see how everybody passes. So I'm just going to briefly remind the other shittas that we discussed last week. We discussed the Bala Lieber, the Bnei Tzion, the Atzei Sada, who they all felt it was, somewhere approximately 135 degrees east of Yerushalayim was the line for various reasons. Some a lot to do with where the sun was at the creation of the world. Now, that list doesn't have as many big hitters. They're not really such a big hitter list, but there might be a little bit of a siman min hashemayim backing them up, because the dateline that they suggest pretty much cuts straight through the ocean without hitting any land, which is quite amazing. And as both Reb Mel Lieber and the Chazon Ish are maskim, that from Sefirah you would not expect the dateline to cut through land. So those are three different shittas as the placement of the dateline. And then we had another shitta, which was the shitta of Rav Itzer Zalman Meltzer and Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, that the dateline, there is no halachic dateline, and we follow the international dateline. We explained the svar for that once again last week. And those are the different shittas. Now, we get an interesting point. So let's just see who holds like what. So worked out, and most of the poskim followed the Reb Mel Lieber. We see Rav Yashiv followed Reb Mel Lieber. We see that Rav Shlomo Zalman followed Reb Mel Lieber. Rav Moshe Feinstein followed Reb Mel Lieber. Rav Scheinberg followed Reb Mel Lieber. Rav Gussman followed Reb Mel Lieber. I think Rav Scheinberg, I'm not actually positive, I got to double check that. But Rav Gussman followed Reb Mel Lieber. So the Roiv of the poskim followed Reb Mel Lieber's 180 degrees to the east of Yerushalayim. Okay. Now, usually in Psak, we have, you have a Gemara, you have Rishonim, and you have, the Shulchan Aruch comes out like this Rishon, that Rishon, and we have Psak. Once again, as we discussed last week, what makes this a fascinating area of Halacha is we have no Gemara. We possibly have a Rishon, not much in the Achronim, and it's kind of the poskim of last generation. They weren't poskim in this scenario; they had shitas, so to speak. Meaning, it's not what did Reb Moshe hold to do when we're in Suffolk now. Reb Moshe wasn't in Suffolk; he held like Reb Mel Lieber. He was one of the shitas. So, Lamaisa, what should we do? So, off the bat, if you're a grandson of Reb Mel Lieber or Moshe Feinstein, you follow him. If you're a nephew of the Chazon Ish, you'll follow the Chazon Ish. But what should the rest of us do? Now, there's going to be what you could get away with doing, and there's going to be what you properly should do. Now, if somebody wants to say, I'm Rav Moshe Dikiyeda, I rely on Rav Moshe. So you can't throw tomatoes at anybody that's going to be relying on the Chazon Ish or relying on Reb Mel Lieber, relying on Moshe Feinstein. You can't call anybody names. You can't call them Machal Shabbos, because at the end of the day, they have big shoulders that they're relying on. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it is the right thing to do, the correct thing to do, the best thing to do. But it certainly can't call them Machal Shabbos, and all those people that want to rely on all those shitas, they definitely could. Anybody that wants to rely on Pesach Frank versus Meltzer and keep the local day, they could. I can't call them Machal Shabbos. But the question right now is, what should we do? So what we should do, let's see what the poskim have to say. So there's a Sefirah, Karach Yisrael. It's somebody who is a commentator of Aaron Cutler in Lakewood, this was like his life mission, is what he devoted his specialty to. He wrote like a 700-800 page Sefer on the Dateline called Tarikh Yisrael. What he advises is, he says, this is Psak, and Psak you follow Rav Paiskin. Where does the Rav lie? So the Rav lies like Rabbi Mel Lieber, 180 degrees east of Yerushalayim, which would mean that, just to put that in perspective, Shabbos in Japan is on Saturday, Shabbos in Hawaii is on Friday. That is the Shita, that's how the Psak din of the Tarikh Yisrael follow Rav Paiskin. There's the guidance of Reb Heinemann of the Star K, that he says follow Rav Shitas as to the placement of the Dateline, which I shall explain in a second. Not Rav Paiskin, but Rav Shitas. We have three main Shitas as to the placement of the guideline. There are groups of Paiskim. So one is the Chazon Ish's, one is Rabbi Mel Lieber, and there's another one which we, the Mel Lieber, the Atzei Sada, all those opinions, which is, as I said, like 135 degrees or so, 2/3 of the way from Rabbi Mechel, from the Chazon Ish to Rabbi Mechel. So that happens to work out very, very close to the civil international dateline, the non-Jewish international dateline. So he says, follow Rav Shitas. So therefore, as you actually, before I go further, I just want to point out that if somebody wants to be machmer and don't be machal Shabbos, keep Shabbos for 2 days, that's for sure a chumrah. There's some that advise to do that, and that kodesh yomer. If somebody's willing to keep 2 full days properly, the races, the rabbanans don't do any isurim on both days. Kodesh yomer, and it's a great thing. It's a beautiful thing to do, but I don't think we could say that that is the halacha. There's a taz that says when you have a suffix, if it's Shabbos, you have to be machmer for the races, and you can make one of the rabbanans. Happens to be this Magen Avraham that says be machmer for the rabbanans as well, but certainly the psak, the pashtus seems to be, if you wrote the poskim, that we're going to say that you can be makel on the rabbanans on the suffix day. So the Reb Heinemann in the Star case is followed Rav Shitas, and therefore the day that Rav Shitas says is Shabbos, keep as Shabbos, and the day that Rav Shitas say is either Sunday or Friday, or the minority of the Shitas say is either Sunday or Friday, keep on those days the Isuri Deraisa, don't be Michal Shabbos Mideraisa, but the rabbanans you don't have to worry about. So how does that work out? The way that works out is actually pretty convenient, because in the high majority of cases, you're going to be able to keep Shabbos on Saturday. So for example, if you're in Japan, so according to the Chazon Ish, you're coming from the Asia side to Japan, you've already passed the dateline, and therefore the day that the Japanese say is Sunday is really Shabbos, according to the Chazon Ish. However, according to those, I'm going to use the Star Case terminology, the mid-Pacific poskim, Mel Lieber, Atzei Sada, so therefore you have not crossed the dateline. And for Rav Chukatinsky, you have not crossed the dateline. Therefore, in Japan, you will keep Shabbos on Saturday. And on Sunday, you'll be makbid for the races. What about Hawaii? So once again, this idea, according to the Chazon Ish, by the time you get to Hawaii, coming from Asia, you've passed the dateline. According to the Mid-Pacific Poskim, you have passed the dateline. And therefore, according to Rav Chukatinsky, you have not passed the dateline. So 2 out of 3, you passed the dateline. So, and you have also passed the international dateline. So therefore, in Hawaii, you will keep Shabbos on Saturday and be machmer for the races on Friday, according to the guidance of Reb Heinemann of the Star K. The only places where you're going to have a different day is there's going to be some little small places like American Samoa, Kiribati, I hope I pronounced that correctly, a couple of little small islands that most of us have never heard of, which in those islands, you're going to have to keep Shabbos on Sunday. or maybe there's some islands, I don't even know, in between top. There could be even Friday, but these are not big destinations. That is for sure, and that works out conveniently. There's also another thing to take into account, that this, based on what Vosner speaks about this, that there is a issue of Zilzal Shabbos. We know if somebody, let's say, lives in Eretz Yisrael, Bal Yisrael, and he comes to Chutz La'aretz on for Yontif. So on that second day Yontif, he can't do a Yontif Tika davening, for example, because it's not Yontif for him. However, a lot of people don't know this, but the proper thing in Halacha is not to do any Yisurim, even B'Kedrei Chadarim. You don't do any Yisurim on that second day Yontif, even though for the Bal Yisrael it's not Yontif, because that is a Zilzal de Yontif. You're stepping into their Yontif and you're doing Malacha, that's a Zilzal de Yontif. Well, if I'm going to go into Hawaii and go drive a car on the day that they call Saturday and the locals keep Shabbos, and Japan, etc., that is a tremendous Zilzal de Shabbos for them. And therefore, that's something that we definitely have to be careful with. And therefore, that day you have to keep as Shabbos. You have to keep the Saturday as Shabbos. So the OU's guidance actually works this way. And they say that you keep Shabbos on the local Saturday and be makbid for the Isuri Derabanan on the Suffolk day. So that would be Friday in Hawaii, you would be makbid on Isuri Derabanan. Sunday in Japan or New Zealand, you would be makbid on Isuri Derabanan. There's another potential way of going with psak. I mean, Reb Chaim says to follow, Reb Chaim Kanievsky says to follow the Chazon Ish, because he was the biggest authority. But if anybody knows a little bit something about Reb Chaim Kanievsky, they know that in psak he always says to follow the Chazon Ish, his father, his uncle, and that's just his mahalach in psak, but that is not the normally generally accepted way of pasking. Then there's another factor which we take into account a little bit. This is not a ikar factor. It's not the number one main factor in psak, but it's not something that has zero weight. We also have to factor in convenience. Convenience is also going to be certainly to keep Shabbos in the local Saturday. Once again, that wouldn't trump a simple halacha otherwise, but when you have such a split, that may be a factor. Okay, so what do we do? I just threw out, the Tayach Yisrael, the specialist, the Star K guidance, the OU guidance, the what do we do? Tachas, what do we do? So what I would suggest to do, personally, if somebody would ask me. So since we have, let's start off with Japan. Let's start off easier. So in Japan, we have pretty much everybody is saying, except Reb Chaim Kanievsky, that in Japan, we are going to treat Shabbos as Saturday. Because Rav Shitas and Rav Peskim and everybody, and Zilzal Shabbos, it's all telling us, keep it on Saturday. So I'm going to keep Shabbos on Saturday and makbid for the Rabbanans on Sunday. What should we do in Hawaii? So this is going to be the trickiest part of this sugya, but I'll tell you what my netiya is. My netiya is, as based on the guidance of Reb Chaim and the Star K and the OU, even though this is against the Tayach Yisrael, is that since Rav Shitas say that Shabbos is on Saturday, and al Zilzal Shabbos, you want to keep Shabbos on Saturday, and al convenience on top of that, you want to keep Shabbos on Saturday. Once again, convenience being the smallest of those factors, but I'm still factoring it in. Then I think the best thing is to keep Shabbos on Saturday and be makbid for the Rabbanans on Friday. If somebody wants to be makbid, not to do Isur Malacha both on Shabbos and Friday, Kodesh Yomer Loi. But I'm not going to tell anybody that is their chiyuv. Okay. But that's the most difficult part to me, because I am saying, again, that is against Rav Poskim. So this is the one part of the shiur that I'm going to say that, but I tremble a little bit in saying that. I'm a little uncomfortable in saying that, because there's so many poskim stacked against it. But I see it's the OU guidance, it's Starcade guidance, and I think, and it's based on Rav Vosner. So I think there is what to say, even though Rav Vosner's Iker Psak was the other way around in terms of his opinion, where the Dateline was. His Iker opinion, but obviously he was very malleable in this. And also, I wanted to point out that Rav Yashiv says an interesting thing. He passes like Rechil Mechal Chukatinsky, but he says for the locals, they should keep Shabbos on Saturday. Because once again, I think he's taking into this convenience factor that you have the convenience and Zilzal Shabbos maybe also. That you have to be normal, you have to be able to live amongst the place. Okay. That's for Malacha. Oh, big point actually. Don't think that when I said, "Oh, you can keep the races and not the abundance." Well, who cares? I have to keep the races and I'm pretty much keeping Shabbos both days. No, you're really not keeping Shabbos. Believe it or not, when you are not doing the abundance, it's not so much Shabbos. It's all dependent on one point, which is a very important point. How do we treat electricity? Is that us midiraisa or is it us derabanan? So we all know, or hopefully, the Chazon Ish paskins that electricity is us midiraisa, whereas Roy Peskim, Chazon Ish says it's baina. Roy Peskim hold it is us midirabanan. Electricity is us midirabanan. The general mahalach of the Peskim of Chutz La'aretz is to say that electricity is derabanan, whereas in Eretz Yisrael there's a split. Some want to say the Ma'aseh Roy Peskim say it's derabanan, whereas there's other Peskim in Eretz Yisrael that, in reverence to the Chazon Ish, they don't want to go against the Chazon Ish, and they're makbid to treat electricity as deraisa. Now, based on this, the question is, what could you do and what could you not do? So if we're going to be relying on the fact that electricity is derabanan, which I think we have a right to do, certainly in Chutz La'aretz, then what could you do on Shabbos? Well, you can do a lot. You can't drive. Let's first talk about what you can't. You can't drive. You can't write with a pen. You can't do shlita. You can't cook. Right? What could you do? So this is where this is really going to come into. The more halacha you know, the more you could do. So you can't drive, but you could order Uber. No problem. Order an Uber to go wherever you want to go. And if you want to go on a trip, go on a trip. You want to buy stuff at the store, buy stuff at the store. It's all derabanan. You can't cook. You can tell a guy to, obviously you have to be no bishul akum. You can tell a guy to cook to you. You can tell a guy to do whatever you want. The whole amir akum is all derabanan. And you can go on your trip. You go swimming in the, you go scuba diving. You're in Hawaii, go scuba diving on that other day. Just make sure your bathing suit that you're going with isn't dirty, because then you'll have kivus d'oraisa. As long as you're going with a clean bathing suit, it would only be derabanan. And you could do so many things. And the light on is probably LEDs, probably just derabanan. You're not sure exactly what type of light it is. You want to be makbid, do it with your elbow. Derabanan. You want to use your computer, you want to use your phone, as long as when you type into your computer, your screen dies after a certain amount of time of not using it, the screen shuts down, so therefore it won't be ksiva miskayemes, and therefore you could do it. So as long as make sure your phone and your computer dies at, the screen goes down, and then you could do it. So you'll be able to do almost whatever you want to do, and you could, have a good day, because there's not so much deraisa that should stop you as long as you know the halachas. If you don't know the halachas and you don't know what's deraisa, you don't know what's derabanan, then you'll have a much harder time. So learn that Hilchos Shabbos before your next trip to Japan. Okay, fine. So now we know a little bit more about what you could and can't do. Oh, I also wanted to point out, I think in Hawaii you could definitely use electricity on Friday. Why? Because Lefi Roy Peskin, we're going to be makel on the derabanan. Lefi Roy Peskin, it's derabanan. Oh, what about the Chazon Ish says it's the Reisa? Well, the Chazon Ish says in Hawaii it's Friday, so it's okay. In Japan, maybe it gets a little bit more sticky because when you start using electricity on Sunday in Japan, the Chazon Ish is going to say, "My hi, what are you doing? You know, it's Shabbos here, and I thought some of the Reisa." So maybe that's not as simple. But I think, anyways, you could use the electricity in Japan if we're going to be making like the place from the Chutzlaritz to treat electricity as a derabanan. Okay, let's go further. How do you daven? Well, what's the question? So, Shabbos Shemoneh Esrei or weekday Shemoneh Esrei? So, the Sefer Yisrael V'Azmanim, guess what it's about? It's about Jews and Zmanim. So, it says that you should daven, a weekday davening on both days, both on, let's use Japan, both on Shabbos and on Sunday, daven a weekday davening. However, add into the Shema Kalinu, V'Seinu Ritzei Ki Eta Mekadesh Shabbos, V'Shema Tefillah Yisrael B'Rachamim, Baruch Atah Hashem, Shemer Tefillah. And if you don't know that exact nusach, you could even probably more or less figure out as nusach, add in some Ritzei Shabbos into the Shema Kalinu. Because if that day is really a weekday, they're adding in the Shabbos shtickle into Shema Kalinu didn't pass the Shemoneh Esrei for you. And if that's a Shabbos, you mentioned Shabbos. Oh, you said all these other brachas. Well, there's a time in the Gemara to say all these brachas during the Shabbos as well. So it's not something that passes, even though maybe we're not matriach, you do it every Shabbos, but it doesn't pass the Shemoneh Esrei. So do that both days. Even though it's strange, you're never going to be doing a Shabbos Shemoneh Esrei. What about Musaf? And don't tell me Nadava, you can't do a Nadava de Musaf. So what are you going to do? So, Sefer Yisrael Zmanim says no Musaf. The Sefer Tarek Yisrael is not so happy with that, and he wants to say, you can't tell me no Musaf. So what we're going to do is, we're going to do Musaf with Behirer. We're thinking about it. And there's a tzad to say that you need to Musaf with thinking about it. And in case you weren't Mechayev in Musaf, it certainly wasn't a saying the Shem Hashem Levatala, saying Brach Levatala, because there's no Brach Levatala Behirer in thinking. Okay. That is what you should do. I also want to point out, if you get a call from Makbid and Halacha uncle asking you what to do, that's what you should tell him. If you get a call from your uncle who's the type of guy that's not so holding in Halacha and Tefillah and Makbid and keep cup and he's going to be confused, I guess that guy you could tell him, say Shabbos davening on Shabbos, weekday davening on weekday. I'm telling you what's the right thing to do. But if it's something that you're not holding by, so, okay, that's for that person who's not holding by and can't do it, they'll be able to be saimech on doing the Shabbos tefillah on Shabbos and the weekday and weekday. But this is, I would call, a better option. Now, what do you do in terms of tefillin? Do you wear tefillin on which day, both days, no days? What do you do? So the main day and not the other day, and what do we do with tefillin? So is there any issue wearing tefillin on Shabbos? So actually, there really isn't an issue of wearing tefillin on Shabbos. There's an issue of wearing tefillin, l'shem tefillin on Shabbos. There's a Gemara on Shabbos that says if you find tefillin in a Rosh Hashanah album on Shabbos, what you do is you put it on and you walk it home and you wear it. L'shem, hey, you like my new belt? It's nice, right? So you wear it as a, so to speak, a garment as opposed to tefillin. So now we could use that principle for us in Hawaii or Japan. Put on tefillin both days and make it tonight. If today is a weekday, I'm wearing the tefillin, l'shem tefillin. If today is really Shabbos, I'm wearing it, l'shem stam, it's cool tefillin that I'm wearing, but not l'shem mitzvah. And you do not make a bracha, and one of shach, you work out fine. What about Yom Kippur? How many days do you fast? This was the original point that brought up this conflict in Kobe, Japan. So what exactly do you do about Yom Kippur? Most of us would have a difficult time fasting 2 days straight. Some of us could do it, definitely a lot of us can't. So what exactly are you meant to do? So the Sefer Tarek Yisrael says On the Iker day, you should fast like regular. And on the Tefillin day, if you have the strength, you should eat with shiur. And like that, you should be able to get by. And, that will work. And don't do malacha on either day. Now, just to note, in Japan, that works out a lot easier than it does in Hawaii. The reason is, in Japan, you first fast the Yom Kippur. You know you did it. And then the following day, you see if you could pull off the shiur. On Hawaii, you have to know yourself a little bit better because the second day is first. So you have to decide first if I'm going to be able to have the shiur and then fast the full day. So that's the challenge. What do you do about Sefirah? So what's the big deal? How long does it take? Count both days. Say Hayom Chamishi Yomim Leimer, Hayom Shishi Yomim Leimer. Today's 5, today's 6. That the person said that actually doesn't work. It doesn't accomplish anything. Why? Counting by definition needs to be definitive. There's no such thing as counting in an undefinitive fashion because that's not counting. Counting is saying today is the 5th day. Today is the 6th day. If you're not saying what it is, you're not counting. It's just words. It's hot air, and that doesn't count for Sefirah. So tachlis, what do? So the Sefer Tachlis says you count the local day like it is. Today is the 5th day, and you make a bracha, and that's your ikr counting. And then afterwards, you say, today is the 6th day, just as like to keep you in the game, just in case that shita is right. But the main thing is you're going to say that today is the 5th day. I want to point out that when crossing the date line, what I just said is right poskin. There is a very fascinating minority shita that says Sefirah isn't based on the locale. It's not based on the date line. None of this type of stuff. It's based on your personal account of sunsets and sunrises. As we're going to discuss soon, that when you're traveling westward, you could switch days. You could go back a day. And it's possible to go back a day to have sunlight the whole time and be in the next day. I said that wrong. To keep sunlight the entire flight, not having a sunset and sunrise, and be getting there at a different day. Or in the other way around, you could go, it's actually more interesting. If you go from, let's say, Taiwan to New York, you'll have a sunset and a sunrise, and then you'll land in New York and it will be the same day as you left. So, for example, you flew, it was the 5th day, you flew from the Far East to New York, you crossed the international date line, all of them, and you left on the 5th and you arrived on the 5th, but you went through a shkia and mates, a sunset sunrise on the plane. What do you count when you get to New York? So there is a shita that says you count the 6th day. Even though everybody's up to the 5th day, you count the 6th day. And based on that, you're going to end up with Shavuos happening a day earlier than everybody else. It's a pretty wild shita, but there is such a shita. Or, by the way, it can happen in the reverse, and you can have Shavuos a day later. But, it's pretty wild. That's not the accepted shita. I heard from somebody that Chabad paskins this way. If I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong. But I've heard that Chabad paskins this way, and it's a pretty interesting shita. Okay. Let me ask you a question. Now we discuss when you're on the plane and you cross the date line and you go into Shabbos, out of Shabbos. What does that mean to me? So let's put that in perspective. Let's say I take the 10 a.m. Friday morning flight from Taiwan towards New York. By the way, this may be easier if anybody wants. You go to the Star K, the International Dateline and Halacha chart, and they have a chart online, a very nice map that might make this easier. If anybody wants a visual on the Star K has a very nice map. Star K International Dateline, type it in, you'll find the map. Okay, so let's say somebody's flying from Taiwan to New York, 10 a.m. flight on Friday morning. Let's make it a winter Shabbos to make it easy. Yeah, 10 a.m. flight Friday morning. And he's arriving in New York 13 hours later, 10 a.m. Friday morning. But he's going to be on the plane for 13 hours. Not only is he going to be on the plane in 13 hours, but he's going to have a sunset when he travels to the east. He's going to have a sunset and a sunrise on that plane. But since at some point after having the sunset, he's going to cross the international date line. And he's going to land on Friday. So if you think about it, what just happened was he got on the plane Friday morning. When the sun set, which was before he crossed the date line, for sure before maybe the Chazon Ish, depends on what time of the year, but Rav Chukatinsky and we'll call him the Mid-Pacific Poskim, he's going to have a sunset before crossing their date line. So when is it going to be? It's going to be Friday night, Shabbos. And then at some point when he crosses the date line, it's going to revert from Friday night to Thursday night. So what just happened here? So let's say somebody was on this flight. Before I get into whether you're allowed to go on this flight, let's say somebody was on this flight. When he enters Shabbos, when there's Shkia, is it Shabbos for him? Most definitely. There's no reason in the world to say it's not Shabbos. He went from Friday to Shkia. The land on bottom of him is Shabbos, even if it's ocean. So it's Shabbos. It's Pasha that it's Shabbos for him. Now, what about when he goes and he leaves Shabbos? But when he's leaving Shabbos, he's not leaving Shabbos with the Shkia with the Tzeis. He's leaving Shabbos just the middle of the night, and he crosses the date line. Whichever date line we're going to decide is the quote real one. Let's just use Reb Chukatinsky for argument's sake. So when he crosses that date line, is that going to move it back into Friday? So according to the Eretz Tzvi, he won't end Shabbos until Shabbos ends at the place where he started Shabbos. That is not the accepted opinion. Rather, you have the Chazon Ish, the Tzal Chachma, the Tzion Abishol, Reb Scheinberg, and Reb Chaim Kanievsky all say that Shabbos ends when you leave Shabbos. Okay, so he's going to end Shabbos. Mid-Shabbos, he's going to end Shabbos. Fine. What do you do on the plane, by the way? Well, what do you do when you're on the plane and it goes into Shabbos? Once again, I didn't discuss here whether you're allowed to do it, but the most, if you're on the plane, what do you do? So first thing is you have to take the muksa out of your pockets. It's Shabbos. Second of all, obviously no using the screen, the TV screen in the front. I'm not saying you should use it ever. I already he's using it for, so I heard some of the planes now have Daf Yomi and Torah Live, which is something great for kids or adults, really, for that matter. I heard they're testing it on a lot of planes. I don't know. That's what I heard. Maybe, okay, so maybe you have an excuse to be using that screen in general. But obviously, no using the screen, no using the light, no using the bathroom. Because when you close the door in the bathroom, guess what? The light turns on. And when you flush the toilet, I'm not sure how that works. I don't know technical, but I'm assuming there's electricity involved in flushing that toilet. So therefore, you cannot do that. So that's, and you sit still in your seat. Okay, Tachlis, are you allowed to take that flight? Is there anything wrong with taking that flight? So we have an early tshuva from the Minchas Yitzchak, who wrote, it's not so early, it's early in this sugya, because he wrote it in the 1950s. Generally, we see early tshuva, you mean a lot earlier than the 1950s, but in the sugya, which just erupted in the 1940s, then 1950s is early. So the Minchas Yitzchak says, you cannot ride that plane on Shabbos. Why not? So he quotes the Chassam Sefirah. The Chassam Sefirah says you're not allowed to ride a train on Shabbos. It's a bittul of the mitzvah, the race of Shvisas Shabbos, resting on Shabbos. Because how could you're bumping up and down, it's uncomfortable. That's not what you do on Shabbos on the train. And the Minchas Yitzchak says, so too on a plane. Now I have a question. Is a plane the same as a train? Are you not allowed to do anything uncomfortable? Anything uncomfortable is a problem? If somebody's uncomfortable going to their mother-in-law, are they not allowed to go to their in-laws on Shabbos? Obviously they're allowed to. So what does it mean uncomfortable? Maybe some bumpiness? It's very unclear. And this idea of the mincha yitzchak, does it apply only to coach, or does it apply to business class, first class? Which airlines? And furthermore, when the mincha yitzchak said this, it was in the era of propeller planes, which apparently were much, much more bumpy. Now, I don't know much about propeller planes, but apparently they were a much less comfortable ride. Now the ride is much smoother. Though, I could counter and say everybody agrees it's a little bit uncomfortable to be strapped in your seat and in the plane, especially, you're flying coach, you have a seat right in front of you. It's not the most comfortable thing in the world, but most poskim do not accept this mincha yitzchak, certainly nowadays, and therefore most poskim say that wouldn't be a problem of Shvisa Shabbos. By the way, just a side point, it sounds wild. Let somebody be on a plane on Shabbos. We all know that you're allowed to be on a boat on Shabbos, right? I mean, there might be certain issues. You might have to leave before Wednesday, etc. But you're allowed to be on a boat on Shabbos, so you're allowed to be on a plane. Now, but there's another issue. What about tchum? Do you have a problem that you are going over the tchum? So, like this, we know the tchum is the general tchum, a payamama, is derabbanan. 2,000 amas, that's the issue derabbanan. But when it comes to 12 mil, so already there's a tzad to say that 12 mil is the raisa. It's not everybody agrees to it, but there's a strong tzad to say that 12 mil is the raisa. So there's a big problem. You're going to be over tchum the raisa. However, there's a Gemara in Shabbos that asks, is there an issue of tchum l'mayla ma'asar tzvachim? And the Gemara leaves it as a suffix whether or not there's tchum l'mayla ma'asar tzvachim. The Gemara doesn't conclude. So now it's a suffix, but once again, I said suffix deraisa, because if we're more than 12 mil, it's probably deraisa, and suffix deraisa, that won't help us. However, where are you flying over? You're generally flying over the ocean when this happens, and even if you're not flying over the ocean, where you're flying over Guam and Samoa and Fiji, there's no Rosh Hashanah in Guam, Samoa, and Fiji. So you're flying over a Carmelis. The ocean's a Carmelis. Now, by a Carmelis, tchum is derabbanan. So even if you're doing more than 12 mil, it's certainly only derabbanan. And now, since the Gemara is in suffix whether there is a tchum l'mayla ma'asar tzvachim, which you certainly, and if your plane's under asar tzvachim, you have more problems than tchum. So your plane's above asar tzvachim. So it's a suffix derabbanan. Are you allowed to be over a suffix derabbanan? So making mitzvah, you're allowed to be over suffix derabbanan. So as long as you're flying back for some sort of mitzvah, let's say to be with your family before Shabbos or visit, etc. So then you would be allowed to be over suffix derabbanan, and that is the psak of many of the poskim, Rav Gusman, Rav Scheinberg. I think Rav Yoshev also said such. Okay. Yeah. Now, let me ask you, when you're on that plane and you hit Shabbos, do you have to make Kiddush? So according to Rav Gusman and Rav Scheinberg, there's no Kiddush required. According to Rav Yoshev, yeah, sure, you have to make Kiddush. Let me ask, before you run into that Shabbos, do you have to do Adlakas Neris? Now, I agree there's a technical problem. They're not going to let you start lighting fires in the plane. However, the pashtus, you could be Yoitza Adlakas Neris with a incandescent flashlight. Almost everybody agrees you could be Yoitza. Moshe might say not to make a bracha on it, but almost everybody agrees you could be Yoitza with an incandescent light bulb. So the best thing is to have that flashlight and turn it on before, and that's going to be what you're going to bench lichta with, so to speak. Actually, you're not going to bench because you're not going to make a bracha. And Moshe Feinstein in general says you don't make a bracha on a flashlight. However, the problem is most of us don't have incandescent light bulbs anymore. Most of us only have LEDs. The incandescents are getting phased out. And most of us do not have an incandescent light bulb in our house unless we have one from 20 years ago. So I just want to point out, you could still buy on Amazon. I just checked. You could still buy on Amazon an incandescent light bulb. They still, incandescent flashlight. They still exist. I'm guessing we're in another couple of years, it won't exist anymore. But as of now, you can still get one, you can still hop one, and that would work. If not, I would say turn on the light from the plane. Maybe it works. It's actually interesting. Some of these planes, they were still flying are from the 1980s. I don't know exactly what's up there. Maybe they are incandescent. I don't know if they changed them. I'm not really sure in the Matthias. But if you don't have the flashlight, you light the thing on top. There may be some other issues with it. I'm not going to get involved with that right now. But better than nothing, especially not making a bracha. Okay, so we did bracha, we did halakas neiros, we did kiddush, we did whether you are allowed to take the flight in the first place. Okay, now let's discuss some of the issues that when you cross that date line, what day is it considered for you? So when we talk about bris milah, pidyon ben, bar mitzvah, what day is it considered? So let's give the example of you have the Chabad Shliach in Taiwan who wants to go visit his parents in Crown Heights. He has a baby boy. He wants to do this Chabad Shliach from Taiwan, wants to do the bris at 770 in Crown Heights because that's his thing. Yeah. So he's going to, the baby was born Monday afternoon, right? In Taiwan. He's going to take the Thursday afternoon flight in Taiwan, which will arrive in New York also Thursday afternoon. However, he's going to experience a sunset and sunrise in the middle. When does he make the bris, this Chabad Shliach? Does he make it on Sunday? Because for him, Sunday is what we call the 8th day. Or does he have to wait until Monday because the local day is Monday, the baby was born on Monday, and you generally have to wait till Monday? Do you follow local days or do you follow his personal count? And same question for Pidyon Ben, bar mitzvah. So, what do you do? So the B'tzel Chachma and Rishayim, but the B'tzel Chachma was the Paisik of Australia, or one of the Paisikim of Australia. So he was definitely very involved in these cities. So the B'tzel Chachma says that it's dependent on the individual, and he's going to make that bris on Sunday, because for that baby, it's the 8th day, even though the calendar doesn't agree. According to Rabbi Cheskel Roth, and Chaim Kanevsky happens to go with him, the clock can be turned back, and he waits till Monday. He brings a raya from a Gemara that's dealing with a girl that turned 3 on, Aleph Adar, and then she had Tashmish, and which would make her a Ba'ula, because you only become a Ba'ula when there's Tashmish when you're over 3. And then what happened is they were Ma'aber the year. And since they were Ma'aber the year and she was born in Adar Sheni, turns out that makes her now retroactively not 3 anymore. So the Gemara passes, she has a din b'sula, as if she was under 3 at the time that it happened. You could rewrite history with changing of clocks. So therefore, because the Roth, and along with him, Chaim Kanevsky, want to say that we can rewrite history, change the clock, so to speak, and we follow the local Monday. Rabbi Yoshev agrees with the B'tzel Chachma when it comes to bris and Pidyon Ben, that we follow the personal count, and agrees with Rabbi Cheskel Roth when it comes to bar mitzvah, that we follow the local count. Okay, so this is, there's hundreds and more things that we're going to discuss. We're running out of time for today. One thing very important that I realized in the middle that I forgot to mention when I was saying why I would say follow the local Saturday as the main day of Shabbos, as opposed to the Sunday in Japan, and more importantly, as opposed to the Friday in Hawaii, and follow the local Saturday, is I was also being mitzvah the opinions of Rav Isser Zalman Meltzer and Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank, also Rav Yonason Steif as well, who say that they pass and you follow the local day. So I forgot to mention that was a very important part as to why I was saying before to follow local day. So when you put it together, you have so many different angles which are pointing towards following the local Saturday as your main day, and that's why I would say to follow Saturday as the main day. Thank you for listening, and Amit Shem will see each other again next week.